Dean Martin received this teacher's letter and did something no Hollywood star would do today. A small-town teacher wrote asking for career advice she could share with her struggling students. Today's celebrities send autographed photos. Dean sent a bus full of professional musicians, donated an entire music program, and changed 28 lives forever, revealing something about old Hollywood values that modern fame has completely forgotten. Maria Benedetti had been teaching music at St. Anthony's Elementary School in Little Italy, Chicago, for 12 years. The school served a community of Italian-American families, many of them first- and second-generation immigrants working in factories, construction, and small family businesses. Most of her students came from families where music was treasured but money was scarce, where children learned Italian folk songs from their grandmothers but couldn't afford piano lessons. Maria taught music appreciation from worn songbooks, donated by local churches, because the school couldn't afford new ones. Her classroom had one old upright piano that was missing several keys, a handful of tambourines, and a record player that skipped every few minutes. When she played Dean Martin's records for her students, That's Amore, Volare and Return to Me, their faces lit up with recognition and pride. These weren't just songs to them. They were pieces of their heritage, performed by someone who had grown up like them, who understood their world, who had made it from the Italian neighborhoods to the biggest stages in America, without forgetting where he came from. In the spring of 1965, Maria noticed something heartbreaking. Her 8th grade music class, 28 students, had started talking about high school with a resignation that crushed her spirit. "There's no point in trying out for the school band," one student said. "We can't afford to rent instruments." Another said, "Music is just a hobby for people like us. Real musicians come from families with money for lessons and conservatory training." Maria tried to encourage them, but she understood their perspective. She'd grown up in the same neighborhood herself. She knew how big the world of professional music looked from a small Italian-American community where most people worked with their hands, not their voices. That's when she got an idea that seemed equally impossible. She would write to Dean Martin. She spent 2 weeks crafting the letter, trying to find the right words. She didn't want money. She didn't want autographs. She just wanted something she could share with her students. Some advice, some encouragement, maybe a few sentences about how someone from their neighborhood could make it in the music business. The letter was 4 paragraphs long, written in her careful handwriting, on simple school stationery. She explained who she was, where she taught, and what her students were facing. She told Dean about their talent, their love of music, and their belief that success was impossible for kids from their background. She ended with a simple request: "If you have any advice for young Italian-American children who love music but don't think they have a chance, I would be honored to share it with my students. They need to hear from someone who made it that the dream is possible, even for kids from Little Italy." She mailed the letter to Dean's management company, with no real expectation of a response. Maybe she'd get a form letter back from a secretary. Maybe nothing at all. At least she'd tried. 6 weeks passed. Maria had almost forgotten about the letter when her phone rang one Thursday afternoon in May. She was organizing sheet music in her classroom after school when an unfamiliar number appeared. "Is this Miss Benedetti?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is Maria." "Miss Benedetti, my name is Rose Romano. I work with Dean Martin's management. I'm calling about a letter you sent to Mr. Martin." Maria's heart started racing. "Oh yes. I didn't expect. Thank you for calling. I understand he's very busy." "Miss Benedetti," Rose interrupted gently, "Mr. Martin read your letter personally. He'd like to speak with you. Are you available now?" Before Maria could answer, a different voice came on the line. That smooth, warm voice she'd played for her students countless times. "Miss Benedetti, this is Dean Martin." Maria literally couldn't speak for a moment. When she finally found her voice, all she could manage was, "Mr. Martin, I can't believe you're calling." "I got your letter," Dean said. "Read it twice. You've got 28 kids who think the music business doesn't want them." "Yes, sir. They're talented children, but they don't see a path forward from our neighborhood." Tell me about them. What do they love? What are they good at? For the next 25 minutes, Maria told Dean about her students. About Giuseppe, who had perfect pitch, but had never seen a real recording studio. About Angela, who wrote beautiful songs in Italian, but thought nobody would want to hear them. About Tony, who could play any melody by ear, but had never held a quality instrument. Dean listened to every word. Then he said something that made Maria sit down at her desk because her legs went weak. Here's what's gonna happen. I'm sending some people to your school. They're going to bring instruments, professional quality ones, not borrowed, yours to keep. They're going to set up a real music room with recording equipment, microphones, and everything your kids need to make real music. And they're going to spend a week teaching your students how the music business really works. Maria started crying. She couldn't help it. Mr. Martin, I don't know what to say. The school can't afford. Nobody's asking the school to pay for anything. These kids deserve a chance, and I'm going to make sure they get one. Get those kids ready to work hard. We start in 3 weeks. 3 weeks later, on a Monday morning in June, 2 large trucks pulled up in front of St. Anthony's Elementary School. The entire neighborhood seemed to have heard something was happening, and people lined the streets to watch. Out of those trucks came 3 professional musicians, a pianist who had recorded with Dean on several albums, a drummer who'd played with some of the biggest names in the business, and a vocalist who taught at a prestigious music school in New York. Along with them came thousands of dollars worth of musical instruments, recording equipment, and sound gear. Maria's 28 students stood in the school courtyard, stunned into silence. "All right, kids," the pianist said. "A man named Frank Catalano. Mr. Martin sent us here because he thinks you've got what it takes to make real music. You've got 5 days. We're going to teach you how to record a song properly, how to perform with confidence, and how to believe in yourselves as musicians. Who's ready to work?" What happened over the next 5 days became legendary in Little Italy. Those 28 students worked from 8 in the morning until 6 at night. They learned proper vocal techniques, how to harmonize, how to play instruments they'd only dreamed of touching, how to use recording equipment that most professional studios would envy. They chose to record Volare, the Italian song that Dean had made famous, but they arranged it their way, with harmonies that reflected their neighborhood's musical traditions and instruments that showcased each student's individual talents. Frank and the other musicians didn't do the work for them. They taught, guided, corrected mistakes, and pushed the students to be better. "Mr. Martin doesn't believe in participation trophies," Frank told them. "If your voices are going on this recording, it needs to be good enough that you're proud of it for the rest of your lives." On Friday evening, they held a concert at the local community center. The entire neighborhood showed up. Over 600 people packed into a space designed for 300. They premiered their version of Volare, and when it ended, the crowd erupted in applause that lasted for 5 minutes. Maria's students stood on the small stage, many of them crying, all of them transformed by the experience of being taken seriously as musicians. But that wasn't the end of the story. That was just the beginning. The instruments and equipment Dean had sent stayed at St. Anthony SR. Maria's music program went from having one broken piano to having a complete music studio. But more importantly, Dean had established a partnership. Every year for the next 10 years, Dean's management company sent professional musicians to St. Anthony's to run the intensive workshop. Every year, a new group of students recorded a song and performed a concert, and every year, Dean personally listened to the recordings and sent feedback, written in his own handwriting. But the most remarkable thing Dean did was something Maria didn't discover until 3 years later. He had created a scholarship fund specifically for St. Anthony's music students. Not a huge publicized fund that made headlines, just a quiet commitment that any student from Maria's program who showed real musical talent and got accepted to a music school would have their tuition covered. The scholarship letters were simple. "Congratulations on your acceptance. Your tuition has been covered by a private scholarship fund established for graduates of the St. Anthony's Elementary Music Program. Work hard, make something beautiful, remember where you came from. Over 10 years, 12 students from St. Anthony's attended music school on Dean Martin scholarships. None of them knew about it until they received their acceptance letters and found scholarship notifications attached. Giuseppe, the boy with perfect pitch, graduated from the Chicago Conservatory in 1973. He became a music teacher himself, working in Italian-American communities across the Midwest. Angela, who wrote songs in Italian, had 3 of her compositions recorded by major artists in the 1970s. Tony, who could play by ear, became a studio musician who worked with some of the biggest names in popular music. But here's the part of the story that reveals who Dean Martin really was. Maria Benedetti didn't know about the scholarship fund. Not for years. Dean had set it up through a private foundation with instructions that his name not be attached to it publicly. Maria only found out when one of her former students called her, crying, saying, "Miss Benedetti, somebody paid for my entire college education. I don't understand who would do that for a kid from the neighborhood." Maria called Dean's management, and after some persistent questions, Rose Romano finally confirmed what Maria had suspected. Mr. Martin wanted to help, but he didn't want recognition. He just wanted your students to have the same chances he got when people believed in him. When Maria tried to thank him, Dean's response was characteristically simple. "Those kids earned it. All I did was remove one obstacle. They did the rest." The story of what Dean did for St. Anthony's eventually got out. A Chicago Tribune reporter wrote about it in 1975, and the story touched hearts across the country. People couldn't believe that one of America's biggest entertainers had quietly funded music education for inner-city Italian-American students for nearly a decade without seeking any publicity. The article sparked a conversation about celebrity generosity and what separates genuine impact from public relations. Because Dean's approach was fundamentally different from how most entertainers operated, even then. He didn't announce the donations on television. He didn't attend ribbon-cutting ceremonies. He didn't pose for photos with students to boost his image. He just did the work, quietly, consistently, year after year. In interviews about the program, Dean's explanation was characteristically straightforward. "Maria Benedetti wrote me a letter asking for advice to share with her students. The best advice I could give them was practical. Here are the tools. Here's the training. Here's the opportunity. Now show me what you can do with it." That's not charity. That's investment in people who are willing to work. Dean understood something that many people miss about success. Talent exists everywhere, but opportunity doesn't. He had been given chances by people who believed in him when he was Dino Crosetti from Steubenville, Ohio. The scholarship fund was his way of passing those chances forward. Today, there's a plaque in the music room at St. Anthony's Elementary School. It doesn't mention Dean Martin by name. It simply reads, "Dedicated to the belief that every voice deserves to be heard and every dream deserves a chance. May every student who enters this room find both." Maria Benedetti taught at St. Anthony's for 35 years, retiring in 1985. At her retirement party, 12 of her former students returned to Chicago to honor her. They'd come from music schools, recording studios, and performance halls across the country, places they'd once thought were impossibly far away. They brought with them a gift, a professionally recorded album of Italian-American songs, featuring all 12 scholarship recipients, performing together for the first time since their elementary school days. The album ended with a track none of them had heard before. It was Dean Martin, recorded specifically for Maria's retirement, singing "That's Amore" in both English and Italian, dedicated to Miss Benedetti and all the teachers who help kids find their voices. After the song, Dean spoke directly to Maria. "Maria, you wrote me a letter asking for advice for your students. But the truth is, you taught me something. You showed me that the best thing someone with success can do is find people like you, teachers who believe in kids. Everyone else has written off, and give you the tools to prove those kids were worth believing in all along." He paused, and when he continued, his voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you for caring enough to write that letter. Thank you for reminding me that success means nothing if you don't use it to help the next generation find their own voices. And thank you for keeping alive the music and values of our neighborhood, even when the world tried to tell those kids they didn't matter. The message of Maria Benedetti's story isn't just about celebrity generosity, though Dean's actions were certainly generous. It's about a different philosophy of fame and success that seems to be disappearing from modern culture. It's about the difference between celebrities who use philanthropy for publicity and people who use their resources to create lasting change without needing recognition for it. It's about receiving thousands of fan letters and taking the time to read one from a music teacher in Chicago. It's about understanding that real impact isn't measured in social media posts, but in the lives quietly transformed over years of sustained commitment. And it's about remembering that when someone asks for advice, sometimes the best response isn't words. It's action, opportunity, and a long-term investment in proving that the dream is possible after all. Today's celebrities send autographed photos and social media shout-outs. Dean Martin sent professional musicians, real instruments, recording equipment, 10 years of training programs, and 12 full scholarships to music school. And he did it all without a press release, without a photo op, and without expecting anything in return, except that those 28 students and everyone who came after them would work hard, make beautiful music, and remember where they came from. That's not just generosity, that's integrity, and it's something modern fame seems to have forgotten how to do. If this story of quiet dedication and the power of answering one letter with sustained action moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with a music teacher who changed your life, or with someone who needs to know that there are still people who do the right thing without needing applause. Have you ever received help from someone who didn't need recognition for it? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible true stories about the values that built old Hollywood and the people who still live by them today.